In 1991, a team of archaeologists excavating the ancient Sumerian city of Nippur unearthed something extraordinary. Not weapons, not royal tomb goods, not a temple or a palace. They found debt records, thousands of them, clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform script, recording loans of silver and barley, interest rates, collateral arrangements, and repayment schedules, dating back nearly 4,000 years. And when economists began studying them, something deeply unsettling emerged. The crisis patterns were identical, interest compounding beyond the ability of borrowers to repay, debt concentrating in the hands of a small creditor class, agricultural land seized by lenders, peasant farmers forced into debt bondage, social instability building until the system cracked. Everything that happened in the 2008 financial crisis, everything that happened in the Great Depression, everything that happens in every sovereign debt crisis in the modern world, it had all happened before, in Babylon, 4,000 years ago. And the most disturbing question is not why ancient Mesopotamia experienced these crises. The most disturbing question is, why did we forget the solutions they found? To understand the Mesopotamian financial system, you have to first understand the world it operated in. The river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates were, around 3500 BCE, the most economically complex societies that had ever existed. The great city-states of Sumer, Uruk, Nippur, Lagash were not primitive villages. They were sophisticated urban centers with populations in the tens of thousands, supported by intensive irrigated agriculture that produced enormous surpluses. Surplus creates the conditions for finance. When you produce more grain than you can consume, you have something to lend. When you can lend, you need contracts. When you need contracts, you need writing. And it is not a coincidence that the earliest writing systems in human history, the cuneiform script of ancient Sumer, were developed primarily for accounting purposes. The very first written documents in human history were not poetry. They were not religious texts. They were grain receipts and ledger entries. Money, or something functionally identical to it, predated literature by centuries. The Mesopotamian financial system was anchored in two commodities, silver and barley. Silver functioned as the store of value and unit of account for large transactions, the equivalent of our modern reserve currency. Barley functioned as the everyday medium of exchange for agricultural workers and smallholder farmers. The temples and palaces of the great Sumerian and later Babylonian city-states acted as proto-central banks, issued standardized weights, maintained granary deposits, extended credit, and set the interest rates at which loans would be made. Those interest rates were not arbitrary. The standard rate on silver loans in ancient Babylon was 20% per annum. On barley loans, it was 33%. If those numbers sound familiar, they should. They are higher than the credit card rates charged to subprime borrowers in the United States today. Here is where the ancient story begins to feel disturbingly contemporary. The Mesopotamian credit system worked well in good years. A farmer who needed seed grain to plant his fields could borrow from a temple granary, or a wealthy merchant, repay the loan after harvest with interest, and continue farming. But the system contained a structural vulnerability that no individual actor could see, and no institution was designed to correct. Compound interest, applied to agricultural loans, grows faster than agricultural output can grow. A bad harvest, caused by drought, flood, or pest infestation, meant a farmer could not repay his loan. The unpaid interest was added to the principal. The following year, he owed more than he had originally borrowed. Another difficult season, and the debt doubled again. Within a few cycles of crop failure, a farmer who had borrowed 1 mina of silver might owe 3, 4, 5 minas, an amount impossible to repay from farming income, regardless of conditions. The consequences were systematic and well documented in the cuneiform record. First came the collateral. Farmers pledged their tools, their livestock, their homes. Then came the land. Agricultural fields, the primary productive asset of the ancient economy, transferred from indebted farmers to creditors. Then came the people. A farmer who could not repay his debt might be forced to surrender his children or his wife as debt slaves to the creditor household. Eventually, the farmer himself might enter debt bondage. The Babylonian economic texts are full of these transactions. They are recorded with the same bureaucratic neutrality as any other commercial exchange. Name of debtor, amount owed, collateral transferred. Witness names, temple seal. The ancient scribes were not outraged by what they recorded, but the kings were beginning to notice something. When enough farmers lost their land, they stopped farming it productively. When enough agricultural workers entered debt bondage, They stopped being available for the armies and public works projects that empires ran on. When wealth concentrated rapidly in the hands of a creditor class, the social fabric of the city-state began to tear. The compound interest trap was not just a personal tragedy for individual borrowers. It was a systemic threat to the entire political economy. And now we arrive at the most radical and most suppressed idea in the entire history of finance. The Mesopotamian kings had a solution to the debt spiral. It was called the Andurarum in Akkadian, or the Misharum. It translates roughly as justice or equity. We know it by a different name today, one borrowed through the Hebrew tradition, the Jubilee. Beginning as early as 2400 BCE and documented continuously through the Babylonian period, Mesopotamian kings would periodically issue royal proclamations canceling all outstanding consumer debts, not restructuring them, not extending repayment terms, canceling them. The slate was wiped clean. Debt bondage was abolished. Foreclosed land was returned to its original farming families. Interest obligations were erased. And the critical historical fact that almost never makes it into mainstream economics education is this: these proclamations were not exceptional events. They were routine instruments of economic governance. Scholars have identified debt cancellations issued by rulers of Lagash, Ur, Esan, Larsa, and Babylon across a period of roughly 1,000 years. The Babylonian king Hammurabi, famous for his legal code, issued at least 4 debt cancellations during his reign. The proclamations were typically issued at the beginning of a new reign to signal the new king's commitment to justice. They were also issued at moments of acute social stress, after floods, famines, or military defeats that had triggered widespread debt distress. The economic logic was understood, if not formally articulated in modern terms. Periodically resetting the debt clock prevented the irreversible concentration of productive assets in the hands of a creditor class. It maintained a broad base of independent farming households who could produce the agricultural surplus the empire depended on. It prevented the social instability that extreme inequality reliably generates. It was, in essence, a macro-prudential policy tool, and it worked. The Babylonian agricultural economy sustained itself through periodic debt cancellation for nearly 2,000 years. Compare that to the lifespan of any modern financial system you care to name. Now the story takes a darker turn. The debt jubilee was not a permanent feature of Mesopotamian civilization. It existed within a specific political context, the strong, centralized state of the old Babylonian period, where a powerful king had both the authority and the incentive to override creditor interests in the name of social stability. As the political landscape of the ancient Near East fragmented, the jubilee became harder to enforce. The creditor class, wealthy merchant families and temple administrators who held large portfolios of debt obligations, developed a counter-strategy. They began inserting clauses into loan contracts that explicitly, preemptively renounced any claim the borrower might make under a future royal jubilee. Read that again. Creditors were writing future debt cancellations out of their contracts, centuries before modern lobbying existed. The tablets containing these anti-jubilee clauses are among the most telling documents in the entire archaeological record. They show a creditor class sophisticated enough to understand the systemic risk that debt forgiveness posed to their portfolios, and powerful enough to force that language into standard loan agreements. As these clauses became widespread, the mechanism that had stabilized the Babylonian economy for a millennium became ineffective. The debt spiral resumed, land continued concentrating, farming families continued losing their independence. The broad agricultural base that had sustained Babylonian civilization began to erode. When the late Bronze Age collapse came in the 12th century BCE, a still debated catastrophe that brought down nearly every major civilization in the eastern Mediterranean simultaneously. Among its many causes, historians now identify precisely this kind of systemic economic fragility. The ancient world had invented the financial crisis. It had also invented the solution. And then it had allowed the solution to be written out of the system by the very interests the solution was designed to constrain. That sequence should sound familiar. The historian Michael Hudson, who has spent decades studying Mesopotamian financial records in collaboration with archaeologists, argues that the failure of modern economics to engage seriously with this ancient material is not an accident. It is a choice. Modern mainstream economics is built largely on models that treat debt as a neutral transfer mechanism, a private arrangement between borrower and lender that, in aggregate, balances out. What the Mesopotamian record shows, with 4,000 4,000 years of empirical data is that debt does not balance out in aggregate. It concentrates, it compounds, and when it concentrates beyond a certain threshold, it destabilizes the entire social and economic system. Lesson 1. Interest rates must be calibrated to the real growth rate of the economy they serve. Lesson 2. Debt is not merely a financial instrument. It is a social relationship with political consequences. Lesson 3. Macro-prudential resets are not radical interventions. They are conservative stabilization mechanisms. Lesson 4. The most dangerous moment in any financial system is when the creditor class becomes powerful enough to write the rules. When financial interests capture the regulatory apparatus, the stabilizing mechanisms erode, the debt spiral accelerates, and the collapse, when it comes, is far worse than any Jubilee would have been. There is a strange amnesia at the center of modern financial thought. We treat the 2008 crisis as unprecedented. We treat the Greek debt crisis, the Argentine default, the Japanese lost decade as novel phenomena requiring new theoretical frameworks. But the Mesopotamian record suggests something more sobering. These are not new phenomena. They are the predictable outputs of a financial architecture that concentrates debt, obligations faster than productive capacity can service them. An architecture that humanity has built, crashed, and rebuilt over and over for 4,000 years. The Sumerian scribes knew what compound interest did to agricultural societies. The Babylonian kings knew that periodic debt cancellation was the price of social stability. We have their records. We have their tablets. We have the data. What we lack is not information. What we lack is the political will to act on what the information shows. Because the same class of actors who benefited from dismantling the Jubilee in ancient Babylon benefits from dismissing its lessons today. The clay tablets have been sitting in museums for over a century. They have been patiently waiting for us to read them correctly. In the museum in Istanbul, there is a clay tablet approximately the size of your hand. It dates to approximately 1750 BCE. It records a debt dispute between a merchant named Ea Nasser and a man named Nani, one of the oldest customer complaints in recorded history. The question that the Mesopotamian record asks us, 4,000 years after those tablets were pressed into wet clay, is a simple one: whether we have the political courage to act on what we know.